Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by our summer partner, Childcare Business Growth, your go-to solution for filling spots, increasing revenue, and scaling your childcare business without the burnout. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at childcarebusinessgrowth.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
Hey guys. Okay. Today's guest is someone from a state we've never had on the podcast before, but it's one that's near and dear to my heart since my family has and continues to live in this state, and they've lived there for, 300 years. So this is Melissa McCall from North Carolina, and she's here to talk to us a little bit about supporting our teachers in doing what matches the research about two things that people are like, those don't go together: play and literacy. How do those go together? So
I know, but I'm excited. But I think you just gave us a new challenge, Carrie. I think we now need to find a guest from every state.
Okay, of all of the countries that have states, or just the United States? Because
let's start with the United States and go from there.
Okay.
But
then we've got the province. I think we also have to do the provinces of Canada at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Sorry, that was such a squirrel. I am sorry, Melissa, you had to see that, but it is what it is. So I'm excited about this topic, Melissa. Tell us a little bit about how this became kind of a joint component for you, like how you put the two pieces together. And then I'd love to hear more about what you do.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So yes, Moving Little Minds is the name of my business, and it's really about taking what research has shown, which we know is play, right? Children learn through play, but then something near and dear to my heart, which is literacy and teaching children to read. So this all began, my daughter, she is now 11, but when COVID hit, she was a kindergartner. And we started to, when she was in preschool, we would do all sorts of letters and sounds and all types of things, and she could rock it out. But I always knew, I was a teacher, master's in special ed, I knew something was wrong. But I was not trained properly with how to teach children how to read. And so I could not figure it out. And it took several years. Well, actually, it took till COVID hit. And my son is with me. He's in preschool. We're doing all sorts of preschool things. She's on her little computer during virtual learning. She comes over to join us. She can't segment syllables. And I'm like, here's my 3.5-year-old clapping away. She can't rhyme. She's 3/4 the way through kindergarten. And so she went to a wonderful preschool. She was rocking and rolling, but that really kind of set a fire under me to say, what is the issue? Why can't she do these things? Are preschool teachers aware of the skills that children can do early on, and are we practicing those skills? So that's kind of, after several years of this journey, I have ended here and absolutely love it. So I'm dedicated to just educating teachers a little bit more on
I wouldn't say you ended there. I think you are just now beginning. I think this is a launch pad. So,
absolutely.
Yes.
So I remember being that early learner, and I remember when rhyming was introduced, and at my school, they introduced both rhyming and alliteration at the same time. I'm going to say don't do that, because I was very confused whether Robin runs a rough and ready route was rhyming, or cats and sats.
Absolutely. And so that's one of the things that we really dive into, is the progression of skills. And when you are 2 years old, you can actually start clapping to the beat, and that is phonological awareness, and that has a purpose. And if we get good at that skill, then that builds and builds and builds. So then we're sending children to kindergarten with a full bucket, and they can grow. Is this through drill? No, it's just through a little bit more intentionality.
But it's still through play. And
Absolutely.
I think that's what's really key here is, you definitely have all different types of thought when it comes to different types of curriculum. What does school readiness look like? And there's the folks who are on the extreme each side, right? Like,
Absolutely.
for lack of a better term, drill and kill, right? Like, it's all letter recognition. And then there's the folks on the, you know, children's work is play. And I would say that probably the majority of the folks, Carrie, that we've met are somewhere in between, right? Like they got a
Yep.
little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I think what's great is that you're going and let's look at the research and let's talk about it. Now, I'm just curious, do you do workshops and trainings and provide materials for parents? You brought up COVID as an example, and I feel like sometimes that might be the disconnect for a lot of teachers is that parent communication.
Absolutely. So before I left and started moving Little Minds on my own, I was doing both. I was in a school and we would do parent workshops um, there as well. But honestly, what I found was if it wasn't a convenient time, they weren't going to show up. I mean, that's just the reality of it. The one that they showed up to most would be getting ready for kindergarten, which my mission is we could do so much very early on. I do have some products that are dedicated to parents and simple, engaging things that you can do every single day, like a tear off calendar. And then I also provide the parents with newsletters. So, providing the director, you download this newsletter and you send it to your parents because it starts with educating the parents and quite honestly, they just don't know what they don't know, right? And so if we
Yep.
can empower them, that can make all the difference as well.
And we make sure that the teachers know before we send it to the parents so that when the parent comes in, the teacher's like, oh, I didn't know that. And then the parents are going, why am I sending this child to this teacher when they don't know what I know,
Exactly.
even though they got the information from the director?
And that would be our newsletters would go to the teachers too, and they would come by and say, like, oh my goodness, I'm learning from this stuff too. Because a lot of the preschools that I'm in around Charlotte are private faith-based preschools, and they might not get professional development, or they might not have learned some of the stuff because a lot of them are parents that turned into the teachers. So,
Well, and I
Yeah,
think,
I
go
mean,
ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to say, I know of a couple of kids off the top of my head who went to programs where the teachers were amazing at running a classroom and helped the kids with socialization, but they did not know any of the stuff, like the science behind of, you know, learning how to sound out words or even how to hold a pencil correctly. Like they didn't know
develop.
any of that kind of stuff. And so the kids went to kindergarten and the kindergarten teachers had to reteach so much that shouldn't have been.
One of the things that I love that you said, Melissa, is that we can start so young. And that's where we often hear those phrases, foundation skills. And even Carrie kind of alluded to sometimes kids may learn it, but they may not master it. Or if they're not using it, they're losing it. And so
Absolutely.
I think that your concept is great for early childhood learners, for the educators, for the parents, and helping to bridge that. What we start at 2, we should keep going because we've all seen that little kid that, goes viral because they're bopping to the music because they've got it.
Exactly.
But we don't ever know where that kid ends up from an academic standpoint because if somebody sat them in a chair at age 4 and said, here's your ditto and here's your pencil, now you need to sound out words, there's a disconnect with that. And sometimes it's because it's what the parents think they want. They've been um, persuaded.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's sometimes coming up with the tactful phrase is not always
Exactly.
the easiest thing to do in the morning, but they've been persuaded or somehow they've seen on television or in media that this is how they're going to prepare their child for a better education. and there's not enough of us that are screaming, it starts with the play. It starts with the play. So absolutely. So if somebody is listening to this episode and they want to know more, what might be a tip you might give a toddler teacher, a preschool teacher, and maybe even a parent on how to incorporate that play piece into their classroom?
So first, it really
Or play
comes
and
down.
literacy. Let me change that, 'cause
Yeah.
they probably figured out the
Yeah.
play, but how to make that
Absolutely.
connection.
Absolutely. So first it comes down to just, I think, starting to understand what are children actually capable of doing. I always say children are capable of amazing things if we just try it. So when I go into, so I teach literacy focused classes here in Charlotte as well. So I go into schools around Charlotte and in the twos classroom. So one thing we do is we might be reading a story about cake. And so we start by sharing our favorite cake. Well, that's probably something that a teacher is doing anyway, right? We want to ask children, ooh, I like cookies. What's your favorite dessert? And one of the easiest things you could do is just clap that sentence. I like cookies. That's it. So you are just literally starting to get children to understand that a word has a beat and a part. And so something as easy as that. From there, we might have a puppet and we're going to say, oh, I'm so hungry. Can I have the cookie? And the child with the cookie is coming up and feeding the puppet. They don't even realize, but I have now, I have segmented a syllable and they blended it and put it back together. So just being very intentional. With alphabetic knowledge, and instead of a pencil and paper, we're using ribbon sticks. And so now we're playing games where I'm in the front making a giant A and you're guessing what did I just form? And then we're forming the A together. So it first just comes down to, I think, knowing what children can do and then making a plan. So I always say it takes intentionality, which can be harder for parents, right? Because they don't always necessarily know what their children can do, right? They're told, here's a workbook. Your kid's going to write some letters this week and they're going to know all the things.
Well, that's what they see at Sam's Club or at Costco, right? Or those 2-inch, things for your kids to do this summer, or, that kind of activity. And I think what's really kind of the downfall for a lot of those things is there's not if your child can't do this, go back and learn those basics. And,
And I mean, one of the things that you were just talking about, Melissa, is starting with gross motor to do those letter formations, large muscles to small muscles, which is one of those foundational things in your first child development class, right? They taught you the 5 rules of child development, one of which is that development starts with large muscles and goes to small muscles, right? You have control over your trapezius way before you have control over the teeny tiny muscles in your fingers. And so if they can do it using their whole arm, they can do that way earlier than they can write an A with a pencil. If they can write an A with their whole body,
that's mapping the brain.
Yeah, it creates that, oh, this is the shape that I need to remember. And we can't do that in a workbook that you can pick up at, a Dollar General or a Costco, right?
There's a great study out of MIT that's about how writing letters in free form is activating the reading parts of your brain. So like getting a child to write the letter in sand is activating the brain more than just simply how much is going on right now while I'm tracing. Nothing's happening in my brain. I'm literally just going. So it's interesting.
I wish everybody knew that, because the number of classrooms that I go into that are 3s, 4s, 5s classrooms, and they have what we would call a ditto because of how old we are, a worksheet that they've put inside a page protector, and they're giving those kids a dry erase marker. And that is one of their, okay, I've finished eating and we're waiting for everybody to get ready for washing hands and going to sleep. And the kids are just laying on their bellies doing worksheets. Oh, it hurts my head every time I see it, especially when they're like, we're a 5-star program. I'm like, how are you a 5-star program when you're doing that in your literacy
Yep.
work?
Yep. And it's hard because it does take a mindset shift, I think. I think to really understand the science behind everything. And so that's kind of my mission is like, this is what science shows, and this is how the brain works and how we can merge.
Well, I think what's great is you brought up a statement early on that I heard, which was the concept of professional development. And, some folks have heard Carrie and I talk about it. I'm not sure we've talked about it a whole lot, even on our episodes, but we are all about making and helping teachers view themselves as the professionals they are. It's a
That
lot
they
of
can be. Not all of them are. The professionals that they can be.
that they can be. And it starts with professional development, not staff training. And sometimes they don't know, kind of like what you just said about the parents, they don't know what they don't know. And I think we have teachers in that same component. And I love the fact that you bring this to the entire center, to every age level, to the director, to the teacher, and then they get to share those resources with the parents. And I think that's that's the disconnect for a lot of professional development that we traditionally see that is for the classroom educator, that sometimes we forget that there has to be that connection, not only at the director level, right? So the
Mhm.
director should have a clue on what you're learning at a conference or at a training, but also how do we share using the professional language of our industry, citing research studies for the parents. And I think that the fact that you give them all those tools is just a great resource because the more we can sound like professionals that are highly educated, that are the experts in the field, the farther that's going to take everything you've just shared into the mind of a parent, because now they have a perception of um, you're not just a preschool teacher. You are an early learning leader. You are an early learning professional.
And I
And
just want to say, how does somebody who doesn't live in Charlotte, North Carolina, get your information, get you to support their staff, and their parents? How can they access your information?
that's a great question. And I do have online courses. So I do in-person trainings, live virtual trainings, and I have two courses out, one geared towards the littles. So it's called Littles in Literacy, and then one called Alphabet Academy, which is exactly what research shows for how to teach the alphabet. And back to what you were saying, Kate, with the training versus the development. I love this point because it starts with a mindset shift, right? We are adults and we can pretend that we are going to do what you tell us we have to do, and we probably aren't going to do it. But if we can change your mindset, and I start with every single training with the science of reading, which a lot of preschool teachers are like, what are you talking about? I teach 3-year-olds. Why does this matter? But it matters because 70% of fourth graders in the US right now are not proficient in reading. And
Wow.
that is the latest national data. And I bring this up to say that it starts with the foundation. So I talk about how a child learns to read and then take it back further and further and what happens in the brain. And from birth to 3, now we are at this rapid growth and development, and what we do now affects all the things later. And so trying to get them to open their mind to the fact that this stuff really does matter. And I 100% believe we preschool teachers can literally change the future of America because I have seen it. I've taught at preschools where they have public preschool, and I was the kindergarten teacher, and all those children that came in were rock stars. I could take my class so much further, even than the little private school kids who went to their little church preschool. These were low income children who got public preschool, and they were well beyond this other side. So that's just my little soapbox of why we matter so much.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's not necessarily the environment, it's who the educators are and the mindset those educators are coming to the table with. I love that. And we are definitely going to make sure in today's show notes that we have links to Melissa's programs, Melissa's courses. I don't know. I'm guessing that somewhere there's probably a book in there stewing somewhere. So maybe we'll have a book up sometime for Melissa as well. But in the meantime, go listen to today's episode. And if you think that this is something that another teacher, another director needs to hear, you want to try to figure out how to maybe even bring Melissa in to do some professional development at your state level, at your program level, please reach out to Melissa. We would love to see more of these play literacy connections happening across the country. And with that, Carrie or Melissa, do you guys have anything else you'd like to say?
Just thanks for having me. Keep playing and learning.
Absolutely. So if you learned something from this show, share it with somebody else who needs to know. And if you think that you have something to share with other people listening to the podcast, definitely go over to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie and sign up. Be our next guest. Maybe you can bring some inspiration to people like Melissa has brought to us today. And we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Childcare Conversations.